You are listening to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast, where we are vigorously equipping men to pursue biblical manliness. This is our midweek A Quiet Life podcast that focuses on living a quiet life, mind your own affairs, work with your hands, and be dependent upon nobody. For more information, visit us at thepursuitofmanliness.com. Well, full disclosure, this is my third attempt at recording this podcast. And sometimes I have to make multiple attempts because batteries die, someone comes to the door or whatever. The third attempt for this one, because this is a hard conversation that I think needs to happen, and I don't feel like I can do this well. That isn't false deprecation or anything like that. We're talking today about the balance of manhood, the balance of manliness, of being a man. And I think there's so much tension around even some of the words that I'm going to say that I think they can be misconstrued. And so I've kind of tried to go back and forth on how to convey this. And I feel like this is a message that needs to be delivered this now. I just enough things that I see, enough things that I'm experiencing, enough things that I'm engaging in or conversations I'm having that I feel like we need to have this conversation. And this balance of manhood. I want to give you the three right now. And before I give you the three, let me say this. I don't have a research team. There isn't a deep theological study to this. I haven't consulted George Barna or anyone else. I haven't pulled anything from out of any other book except for some scripture. And I'm taking scripture, and through scripture, I'm trying to look at what I see, the landscape I see right now within my own life, within my own sphere of influence, my own relationships, etc. Hopefully that makes sense. So here's the three things. I'm going to say them, and then I'm going to do my best to unpack them, okay? Being a man with grit, being a man with emotions, being a man with a friend. You have to have all three. In my mind, I kind of see this triangle. So when my wife and I got married, someone said to her, and I'll probably botch this, but the idea was, looking at God at the top, and then me at one corner, and my wife in another corner of this triangle. And then as we get closer to God, we get closer to each other. And so I kind of see a triangle in my mind when I look at these three things. Granted, I don't know if there's any, I think that's where the analogy ends. I want to start with this, being a man of grit. Being a man is hard at times. Some of the things that we stress over, some of the things that we have to go through, deal with. I'm not saying it's any harder than being a woman, okay? But I'm talking directly to being a man. I'm saying being a man at times is going to require you to have some grit. Being a man at times is going to require you to do some things that are not fun. It's to require you to be unpopular. It's going to require you to put in a little more effort, a little more skin in the game, a little more relational, emotional, spiritual, physical investment into things. Being a man means you need to have some grit. You need to get in your mind, I will do the things that need to be done for those who matter the most. Starting with Jesus, moving from there. I'm going to start with Jesus. Then I'm going to move to my spouse if I've been given a spouse. I'm going to move to my kids if I have kids, my coworkers, whatever that is. Start to look. I'm going to do the things that need to be done regardless of how I feel about it, regardless of if I enjoy it or not, regardless of whether it takes me away from my fun things, my hobbies, the things that I want to do, whatever. Being a man is going to require you to have some grit, to develop some relational, spiritual calluses. And I'm not saying have a calloused heart. I'm saying you've created some endurance in your life. You've created some can-do. You've created some, I will incorporate discipline now because there's something far better down the road. I was just talking to, in our small group last night, there was a guy, I think he's the only single guy in the group. And at the end of it, I think he's like 18, 19 years old, and we're, all older in the group. And he said, is it really worth it to wait till you're married to have sex? And I thought he was messing with me at first. And I said, yeah, because God said that's what you're supposed to do. And so that's just the way it is, And I thought, well, that wasn't a real nice answer. Thankfully, the rest of the people in the group gave him a much better answer. And then we kind of unpacked what the Bible says and those things. And then in the parking lot, we got to talk about it again. And I told him, one of the things I said to him was, if you just have to believe it's worth it. If you don't believe it's worth it, then Satan will say, well, do whatever you want to do. But if you believe it's worth it, you say, I'm waiting for this girl, and I'm waiting for this woman that I'm going to marry someday, and I don't want other guys putting miles on a car that I'm eventually going to have. The same token, she doesn't want a bunch of girls trying you out either. And so then you get to that point where you're going to get married, and you're like, you have all these stories. What if the story was you were absolutely worth it? That's going to require some grit on his part, isn't it? That's going to require some real grit to say, you know what? Technically, I'm single. I can do whatever I want. Or do I surrender to God's will to live a life of restraint, to take every thought captive, to not just use my body however I want to use it? That's going to require some discipline. It's definitely going to require some grit. And I think we need some men with some rugged approach to something. We become too climate controlled in our approach to life in general. And I say climate controlled, if the temperature gets too high or too low, then immediately we think we have to adjust it. That's what happens to us emotionally, relationally, whatever. If anything gets too high or too low, then it's got to be adjusted. We got to, there's certain people in your life who always have to let you know about the temperature, the volume, whatever. I think there's men that way. You get hungry and you become someone else. You get lonely, you become someone else. You get sexually frustrated, you become someone else. You have some grit. Have some can-do in your life to say, it is absolutely worth it. It is worth it. Or, you know what? I'm going to be steadfast. I'm going to be immovable. I'm going to be not subject to change regardless of how my conditions are, regardless if they're favorable or not. When the storms blow through my life, I'm going to have grit to remain steadfast. I'm going to be like a tree planted in streams of water, and I'm going to yield fruit. I'm going to yield leaves in season and out of season. Paul wrote this, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Let all you do be done in love. 1 Corinthians 16, 13 to 14. Be watchful. Why? Because the enemy of your soul wants to ruin you, squash you, render you ineffective. Stand firm in the faith. We have a bunch of guys who think private faith is the equivalent of actual faith. It's not. It's not. It's like, owning a guitar and saying, well, I can play the guitar. Well, not until you actually learn how to play it and teach yourself or take lessons are you actually a guitar player. Some of you guys got so close to faith that you actually believe you might have it, but you're not actually doing anything to practice it. You're not doing anything to apply it, but I got a private faith. I don't think you do, buddy. Act like men. What does it mean to act like a man? Well, it means to... whatever. I've said before, if you want to know what it means to be a man, you go back to Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2. This is before sin. You realize you are created in the image of God. You realize that you are to be fruitful and multiply. You're to be a man of presence. You are to work and keep what's been entrusted to you. And if you do get married, you are to marry a woman. You are to leave your mother and father, hold fast to your bride, and the two shall become one flesh. Those 5 things happen before we ever get to sin. Once we get to sin, then it's identified by the amount of land you have, the amount of cattle you had, how many wives you had, how much influence you had, your clothes. Look at the kings in the Bible and the parties they would throw and stuff. It was all to show off, look what I have, I am a man. We're not that far from that. Look at whatever, I am a man. And some guys say, well, I don't have a lot of accumulation, so I must not be that much of a man. We need to learn to be men of grit. Men of grit because it matters. Number 2, being a man with emotions. We're not good talking about emotions. We're not good at exercising emotions. A friend of mine said a couple years ago, he firmly believes, and I think he's absolutely right because the scripture would attest to this, that we have more than just a couple of emotions. We typically have an emotion or two that we're very comfortable with, and anger is always there as well. So you have an emotion of joy, of sarcasm. I don't know if that's an emotion, but it feels like it should be. Anger, lust. We have all these different things that just boil up in us, and we need to realize that, again, you take every thought captive, but being a man with grit means that just because I have an emotion doesn't mean it's accurate. Just because I feel something doesn't mean it's accurate. Just because I think there's something, that doesn't mean that's right. We were just reading Joshua 22 today where, the 9.5 tribes looked over and saw what the 2.5 tribes had built and said, that's it, we're going over there, we're going to make war with them because they have turned their back on God, only to find out they hadn't turned their back on God. Perception wasn't reality. It wasn't until they went there did they find out what was really going on. And I've been guilty of that a number of times, that my emotions were not accurate. Now, I say this in a delicate manner because there are guys who are really going through some stuff, okay? You're really going through some brokenness. You have some issues. You have some things, and you're not sure what to do with them. I'm hoping number 3 will help with this. So just hold on to this, if you will. There are times in my life as a man when I am in an environment where my emotions need to come last. Not first, last. Which means I may have to stiff upper lip it, or I may need to just be stone-faced, or I may need to be positive when I don't want to be positive, or maybe I need to issue cause for concern when others aren't issuing cause for concern. There are times where my emotions need to be last. I'm a firm believer that you eat last. As a guy, you should go last. When people come to my house, I will always be the last individual through the line. It's not look at me because nobody really cares. They're too busy eating their food to look up and go, oh, Jared went last. No. To me, it's a way I can show respect to others in my home. You go first. You take whatever you want. If we're out of roast beef or whatever it is or whatever we're having tonight, I'll figure it out. We'll be fine. I want to make sure you get what you need. That's what we need to do as men. There are times where our emotion needs to be put in neutral for a minute. I've walked into hospital rooms where people are falling apart because their loved one's dying or there's a funeral and you have to be the emotion that is neutral. But listen, there has to be times where you can be honest about your emotions, and I think it's important to do that with the right people. People say, well, my wife is my best friend. That's true, but she's not going to fully grasp what it means to be a man and some of the things that you're wrestling. She's just not. So you got to find that balance. So I tell God everything. Good, you should. But I also believe you need to tell other people stuff too. Proverbs 29:11, a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. There are times I need to hold back on my emotions. There's a time that I'm going to have that I can dump them, but there's a time that I'm going to need to hold it back. Now listen, Ecclesiastes chapter 3 talks about a time for everything, right? A time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to plant, a time, right? Like, you understand? There are times, guys, you need to find a place that you can be honest with your emotions. It will keep you healthier in the long run if you can figure out the right means to communicate your emotions and what you're wrestling through. And again, just because you have the emotion, it doesn't mean it's accurate. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't share it. Okay? So the right context, I can feel really frustrated about something, really angry about something, really have cause for concern for something. And when I've communicated to some people, there are times where people say, Jared, I think you're wrong. Actually, I didn't see it that way. Actually, the way that I see it, or here's what I know, or here's what I've learned, and to me, that's been a comfort when it's come to my emotion. However, I still have to have a place where I can share that emotion. I say that because there are men who are going through some real things right now, and you're having some really terrible thoughts, terrible feelings. And you feel all alone, and you feel like nobody's paying attention to you, or nobody's hearing you, or nobody's listening to you, or nobody cares. And I want you to know they do. Being a man really is two sides of the same coin. The grit, the fortitude, the skin in the game, to be steadfast. But there's another side of this that's very real, that you have to be able to let your guard down and say, you know what? I do not have this whole thing figured out. I see this in Tribe. Tribe is a 6-month community. It's not open right now to register, but it will be in a couple weeks. Guys will sign up. They want to be in this. Their wife said you need to do this. They're about it. Once we get into it and we start having real conversations, they go away. And it's amazing to me how many men need a break from like social media once they're in Tribe. Right. It's because you're feeling uncomfortable. You're feeling like I'm the only guy that doesn't have this figured out. I'm telling you, if you'll go to your men's group, if you'll go engage in Tribe, if you'll get in community, if you go to a small group or whatever, like that guy did last night, and say, hey man, here's where I'm at. If you'll do that, you might find there's more people in there that go, oh, I've been in that same situation. And it's not just you. That is so helpful, right? Now listen, when you go through some stuff, and you will, we all do. We all go through some stuff. If you do your best to remain in the light, which means do the things that are good, do the things that are healthy, do the things that will give you a better future, and you don't just flush your life down the toilet and say, let's see how big of a mess I can possibly make of my current circumstances. When you do that, I want you to know this, the Lord is giving you a story to tell. You can then tell other people, here's what I did when I went through that. when we lost a child, when I lost a job, when my spouse left, when I had a fall with my kids, when I had that medical report, when I didn't have any money, when I was caught up in addiction or whatever it is, if you will pursue community, if you will pursue conversation, the Lord is giving you a story to tell. However, if you give into every whim and everything that you desire and everything that you think is fun for the moment, you don't have a story to tell. The reality is we're going to have emotions, we're going to have desires, we're going to have temptations, but that doesn't mean we have to sin. Ephesians chapter 4, 26, 27, be angry, don't sin. Do not let the sun go down your anger. Give no opportunity to the devil. Sometimes you just got to tell your spouse, I love you, but we need to go to bed. Right? You don't want to stay up 3 days in a row. Some people have tried that, I'm sure. Say, I'm for you and I'm with you. Don't give any opportunity to the devil. Some of you are not only giving him opportunity, you're actually giving him the roadmap to ruin you. In particular, here's the things that will really ruin my life right now, and then you go do them. And then I've seen people almost brag about it. Not only are you doing these things, it's almost like, yeah, this is what I'm doing, and then you're kind of telling people, this is my roadmap to ruining my life. Wow, that is a great how-to ruin everything that you've ever worked towards right there. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. We need to have these emotions in check, but we need to share them at the same time. Do you understand that? Like, you need to tell people, like, man, I got some stuff. Make a Facebook post. Let people know. I've seen people, we have like a prayer room where we share prayer requests, ups and downs. I've seen people share these heavy prayer requests in Tribe. And then on their own social media, they share pictures of like vacation or a sandwich they ate or whatever's going on. So why did Tribe or whatever the community that you're part, why did they get the heavy stuff? Everyone else in your life thinks everything is wonderful and good because you're trying to keep a facade up that it's all good. Well, no wonder why you're left carrying the weight of all your emotions. That's impossible to sustain that. You can't do that. Here's the third one. So the first one is be a man with grit, be a man with emotions. We understand we are going to have them. They're not bad. Use them for good. Sometimes they are misleading, though. Number 3, be a man with a friend. There are a lot of guys without a friend. That sounds so like that was like an insult when you were a kid. Like, you have no friends, right? There's some men who literally have no friends. And I want to tell you right now, in the world we live in, you have the access to everything. And some of you guys know that because you're caught up in some dirty, dark stuff. Get out of that. Get in the light. But with the internet and the access to that, you can have, like I just sent an email out today. The Pursuit of Manliness is a community that is absolutely global. I don't know the number of continents that I've had guys message me from or be a part of Tribe or be a part of, the podcast. I mean, global. There's very few places, honestly, that haven't had at least some access to content from the Pursuit of Manliness. It's not because I'm a world traveler. It's not. It's because I've decided I'm going to use Facebook and Instagram and iTunes and Spotify and YouTube for good. We're going to do it for good. We're going to do it to the best of our ability. I've sent gear all over the world. Australia, Denmark, the UK, Canada, Belgium. I'm trying to think of Mexico. There's some other places that we've sent. But nevertheless, the point is, you can get people of the same mindset. Yesterday, I told our guys in our church that for our retreat we had like a handful of spots left, and I said, I want to encourage you to not only did a number of them sign up, but don't sign up, but would you consider, is there someone I could bring with me to this retreat? Because I think sometimes the mentality is, look, I signed up, get off my back. Okay, are you good? No, but really think about this. Has to be bigger than yourself. And the point I made was, we got guys coming from all across the country to land in Indy for that weekend, and a large number of them are bringing people with them. They really are. They have these, they're communing with all these people coming here. I'm like, would you consider that? And so at the same time, I'm talking to my wife about, man, how do we get our guys to understand that? I had a text message probably an hour or two earlier from a friend in Virginia. And on the way to church for small group, I got a text message from a friend in Texas. essentially saying the exact same thing. There's men's things going on, and they can't get guys to engage. And maybe that's very familiar to you guys as well. Maybe you're one of the guys that won't engage. I don't know. But for you guys that are trying to lead men's ministries, you're trying to get something started at your church, like we all understand that. And I think that's the power of community online, that we can come together and say, yeah, I understand that. And you can find guys, you're going through your second divorce. You can find guys going through the same thing. You're going through the loss of a child. You're going through a loss of a job. Whatever ails you right now, you can find that stuff on there. And a lot of healthy guys, I firmly believe, Tribe in particular, but also the Herd. I know the Herd's off of social media, but the communities that Pursuit of Manliness has, like, you'll find some really good guys who have no interest in being a celebrity, who have no interest in being the loudest and the longest and all that. They just don't. I mean, that's really why I think the Quiet Life resonates with so many guys, because, look, I'm not trying to make this about me. When something happens in the world, I don't get on the Instagram or the microphone and, well, let me tell you how you should respond that way. I don't do that. It's not my style. Very few podcasts have had anything to do with things that were going on in the culture. In 2020, there was some when it came to like COVID, like just not COVID itself, but like having hope in the resurrection. And then we had a lot of social justice things in that summer, and people were saying your pastor needs to preach on this and teach on this. We've had that with abortion. Your pastor needs to teach on this, preach on this. No, your pastor needs to preach the gospel. If he's called to ministry, he's called to preach the gospel. He's not called to be a commentator on cultural events. He's not. If you want to do that on Tuesday afternoon, fine. But Sunday morning or Saturday night, whenever you meet, you gather as a collective body of believers, that's to proclaim the whole counsel of God. If you want hot button topics, they're out there. You can find it. You can find those churches. You can find those podcasts. And some of you really like them. That's fine. That's not what we're doing here. I will say that you will find really good guys here. I love Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. Bear one another's burdens. When you say bear one another's burdens, what's the image there? Two people working together. Earlier today, as I record this podcast, the Queen of England, the service was happening in Scotland. I'm probably going to mess some of this up, so forgive me. I call them pallbearers. That's what we call them here in America. I don't know what they were. 6 men in uniform. I think there were 6. And they were carrying the Queen's casket essentially on their shoulders, and they were carrying it to the car, out of the car. And one thing I found interesting was they put their arms on each other's back or shoulders as a way, in my mind, it was as a way that the casket collectively would rest on there. So essentially you had 6 arms coming together, but together those arms were stronger, and they were holding onto the back of the other individual. Each guy using the other individual, not only as a way to keep pace, but as a way to keep things moving in a consistent manner forward. It's just fascinating when you think about that. That's the image of what Christian men should be doing. Bear one another's burdens. Not only are you finding ways that you can share your burdens with people, like, man, here's something I'm going through. Here's a prayer request I need you to intercede for this. I need you to really give me counsel on this, or just listen to this. But you do it for other people as well. Sometimes we struggle with having a friend because we don't know how to be a friend. You expect a friend to just always be into your things, and you're never into their things. To always be about your emotion, and you're never about their emotion. Or there's those guys that always kind of play coy. You have like a friendship with them, a relationship with them, but you really don't know them, right? So bearing one another's burdens, why do we do that? Is it to get in each other's gossip and find out what's going on? Nope, I don't want to know people's gossip. So fulfill the law of Christ. That seems like a big deal. If you were to fulfill the law of the land that you live in, it means I have right living, right? I'm not lawless. I'm fulfilling the law. Well, I want to fulfill the law of Christ and bear one another's burdens. And so I think when we understand that idea of these 3 aspects of being a man with grit, I respect men who have grit. Men who fold, men who are lazy, men who blame others, it's really hard to respect them. And so we got to outgrow that. Number 2 is being a man with emotions. Listen, you are going to have emotions. They're not always right, but they're also not always wrong. And you need to find a place where you can talk about that. You need to find a guy that you can talk to and say, man, can I just talk to you for a minute? Or can you just keep this to yourself? And listen, not every guy can do that. There's some guys who have diarrhea in the mouth. They cannot keep it to themselves. They just can't. They're not the guy to share with. So your emotions, your wife needs to know what's going on in your life if you're married. Your kids, to a degree, need to know some things that are going on in your life. I remember my daughters one time saying, Dad, do you ever cry? And I'm like, I've cried. I don't cry that much. I get more caught up in an emotion than tears. But I thought, I don't want my daughters thinking that I never cry. I also don't want to be a guy that always cries. The other day, my daughter was really emotional about the Queen dying, and she loves all things England. And I'm kidding. She's all about it. The soccer teams, the culture, everything. And so a teacher in her class was mocking her for being upset about the Queen. It was a guy teacher. Now, I know this guy teacher, and I've had lunch with this, or breakfast, whatever it was, with this guy teacher, and over his biscuits and gravy, I think he cried 3 different times. But he's going to mock my kid, my freshman daughter, for having an emotion about, like, you want to talk about sending a message to other people about their emotion. Like, hey, man, you have emotions. Make sure they're in check, and make sure there's a funnel to that. But you got to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to communicate with people what's going on in your life. And the third one is having a friend. I think we can have a lot of acquaintances, and I think we can pull ourselves away from accountability. You need to establish friendship. And when you understand friendship, acquaintances, you'll always have those. Accountability, you'll realize that's like a next level, and you will seek that and you'll find that. There are people in my life that I'm incredibly close with, and there are people in my life that I would say are in the circle, and then there's people in my life that are acquaintances, right? It's not a popularity contest. It's just the way you gravitate towards these relationships, and you have to continue to cultivate them. Those who are acquaintances might eventually move into a place where they become accountability. There might be someone who will stand by your side when you go through some really hard things. Or maybe those that you thought were close, you might find out over time they weren't. But nevertheless, we need to aspire to not only look for friendships, but to be a friend, that I can bear other people's burdens, but they can bear my burdens as well. And again, that image that we can put our hand on the back of other men, and we can carry this load together, and we can do it with pace. We can do it with rhythm. We can do it continually moving forward. And when that happens, and if we get this mindset, I think we'll just have healthier men. When you have healthier men, naturally you're going to have more healthy marriage. You're going to have less addiction. You're going to have less fallout. You're going to be able to be watchful, as we started out with. You're going to be able to stand firm in your faith. You're going to be able to act like a godly man and let all you do be done in love. I want to wind down with this. Listen, I don't have this all figured out. These are things that I'm working on. These are things that I'm seeing in my life. These are things that I'm seeing in the lives of friends of mine, of the communities that I'm a part of when it comes to the herd and tribe. Being a man with grit, being a man with emotions, being a man with friendships. This is important. We're talking about being a healthy man. We're talking about really like physical health, relational health, spiritual health. This is critical. And we're also talking about mental health. You're going to have some things in your life that are going to be hard. It is hard at times to have grit when you don't feel like it. It is hard sometimes to have your emotion in check when everyone else seemingly has their emotion. It is hard at times to convey, I'm nervous about this, or I'm concerned about this, or I'm fearful about this, or I have great trepidation about this, or here's my perspective on this. It is hard to do that. And sometimes it's hard to find like-minded men who will be your friend, especially when you put yourself out there in a vulnerable place. But man, I want to tell you, the guy that's listening who doesn't have a friend, who doesn't have his emotions in check, who maybe you're all grit or no grit, I don't know. It is absolutely worth it. It is absolutely worth it. And you have to remain teachable, and you have to remain open to the fact that you can grow. There is hope. It is absolutely worth it. I've shared this story before, and I'll wrap up with this. About 4 or 5 years ago, I'm putting my son to bed, and what I was doing in that season, like, he would cry every night because he wanted his mom. I'm like, come on. So I would kind of rough house. And I'm not a big wrestler with my kids. I kind of rough house. I might jump on the bed, and he had all these stuffed animals. And I'm like, come on, and I'm kind of giving him like the football coach, rah, let's do this. We're going to bed. Yeah. It's just like looking back now, I'm thinking, what are you thinking? But I was trying to make it something that would distract him from wanting to cry for his mom. Maybe that's why he was crying for his mom. And somehow in the course of me walking out of his room one night or something, he made this statement, and I can't remember it completely, but he said, like, that's why you're mad at me. And I mean, it hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. It hurt because I realized in that moment, his perception of what I was doing, putting him to bed, was that I was upset at him. what I was thinking was I was trying to toughen him up. I was trying to kind of eliminate the emotion. I was being friendly with him. I was being a rah-rah, football coach. He's a sports guy, come on, we can do this, whatever. And I'm thinking, I just want you to not cry for your mom. Go to bed. We can just wind down the night. It doesn't matter what my intentions were, does it? And that hit me, man. And I've really thought about that every time we put them to bed. And we are parents that we have put our kids to bed. They're teenagers now, a couple of them, we don't put them to bed, okay? But we did for a long time. We kind of had a winding down the night. We're going to pray together. Maybe we read something, maybe we don't, whatever. We definitely tried to do that more times than we didn't. And that's what he told me, and I'll never forget that. And it doesn't matter how I felt in that moment. I didn't go in my room and pout. I didn't let him know I was sad or I can't believe you misconstrued what I was trying to do. And here's what, boy, you need to grow up. No, it didn't matter, did it? You look at the eyeballs of a 5-year-old kid looking back at his dad. You're like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. None of that list mattered in that moment, did it? Because that was absolutely worth it to get that right. Now, listen, there are times we have what I call a hey guy talk. Pull him aside, say, hey, guy, let me tell you something. Or you'll talk to your mom that way. Or you will do this. Or this is the most important thing in your life at 9 years old right now. I stopped him one time coming off a soccer field, and we had kind of a hey, guy talk of some things that were transpiring. And I said, no. This ends. So it's not a matter of letting my kid run all over me. Wrong. But the people in your life should have the right to be able to have a feeling and emotion and thought and stuff as well without you throwing the pity party. Listen, you develop some grit, you can take some stuff, right? Being a man, you're going to have to take some things. Ain't always going to like it. Being a man with emotions, sometimes your emotions are accurate, sometimes they're not, but nevertheless, it's okay to have an emotion as long as we don't sin in the emotion, as long as we don't cause harm and hurt to other people, and we find the outlet for the emotion that is appropriate. And one of the ways of doing that is being a friend and having a friend. I'll go back to that image that you can put your arm on the back of some other individual, another guy, and you can keep pace and keep moving forward and do the things that need to be done, and you can be healthy, at least healthier than you would be if you avoided these things. If you avoid those 3 things, developing grit, understanding your emotions, seeking out accurate friendships, nothing good is going to come from that. But if you'll at least examine yourself, if you'll at least consider this, how is my grit? How is my fortitude? How is my steadfastness? How are my emotions? Can I keep them in check when necessary? Can I find the appropriate outlet when the time is right? And what kind of relationships do I have? That's very fluid. That's going to change from time to time. But am I seeking out friendships? Am I seeking out solid relationships? Am I finding people that are like-minded that will help me keep pace and keep moving forward? Men, just at least consider that. Amen? I'll talk to you guys in a little bit. Thank you for listening to the Pursuit of Manliness podcast. If you would, make sure to visit iTunes and leave a 5-star review to let others know what you think of this show. When you get a chance, make sure to visit thepursuitofmanliness.com to see what is available in the gear store, find more information out about Tribe, and much more. Thanks for listening, and let's keep pursuing biblical manliness.